What comes to mind when you think of Haiti? Poverty? Civil unrest? What about the Fibonacci sequence? I've got an author I want you to meet whose book takes this famous pattern to an unexpected place, rural Haiti's Central Plateau. Here you'll meet a young girl whose gift for numbers and a lot of courage to tell a different story about a country we may only assume we know. Stick around because you'll not only learn more about the book, you'll learn about the writing journey this author took to create it.
Welcome to A Book Finds You podcast. This week's guest is Philippe Monfiston. Join us as he shares the inspiration behind his book, along with his writing process, routines, and challenges. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, Rob Shawless.
Today's guest, Philippe Monfiston, is a father of three and under. Husband, Catholic, Haitian American, classic major turned international affairs professional, and author. He writes children's picture books and adult nonfiction, focusing on word puzzles, Greek and Latin inspired prayer guides. His 10 plus years in global health work and 2011 visit to Haiti inform his current children's book, Phoebo's Child. Happy to have you with us and welcome to the show, Philippe.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
It's a pleasure. I want to dive right in. Start with a basic definition of that word that I struggled with, Fibonacci sequence. Tell me about that.
So that I actually had to relearn myself. So the way the book came about was my daughter, she's now 3, but when she was about 1, she was very much, into the Sandra Boynton children's book series. So the Going to Bed book, but not the hippopotamus. And there was one she wrote called 15 Animals. And if you read it, I mean, it's as it says, it starts with 1, 2, 3, and so on. And when you get to 5, I thought, well, if you add them all up, 1 to 5, you get 15. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a pretty coincidental, sequence. And I thought, well, is that the Fibonacci sequence? It's been years since I've touched a math book. So I thought, is that what it is? And so I looked it up. And as it turns out, the Fibonacci sequence is a sequence of numbers where the next term is the sum of the previous 2 terms. So, it goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, and so on. And so when I read it, and of course, when we were in the thick of the children's book selection process, at the library, I thought, there's so many books out there where, it's a 1, 2, 3 counting book. And when I, read about the sequence, I thought, well, wouldn't it be, a nice twist to introduce kids to counting, but, counting the sequence. And it's pretty simple to figure out. So, you can teach them to count in a new way. And the book was originally called Let's Count Phoebo Style. So, but then I thought, okay, well, Fibonacci sequence, that's, something new for counting books, but, how could I make it even more of a, novel twist? And so I thought, well, why not set it somewhere that people wouldn't expect? And, racking my brain, I thought, well, why not go close to home, so to speak, culturally? And so I chose Haiti. And from there, it became, how to then, craft the story, the character. As I said, or as you mentioned in the bio, drawing from my travels there. And that's actually the first and last time I've been there. So it's been it's been 14 years now.
Yeah.
But it stuck with me. And I wanted to, both in terms of my family's heritage and that experience, to weave it into the book, weave those into the book.
Wow. Now, this is told both in English and in Haitian Creole. So how difficult was it to find the right words to write in English?
Well, that was its own challenge. So,
Right.
having to rely on memory to, go through the medical mission clinic experience. Um, you know, I was fortunate to have my pictures from that trip there, so I could, kind of draw on those for the image that I wanted to craft and describe. But, of course, you have your public health. It's essentially an errand that she's sent on to retrieve heart medicine for her father, the young girl. And so, being very specific in terms of the public health language, trying to describe some of the, cultural features like the tap tap bus that's very prevalent in Haiti.
Yeah.
It's like a, informal bus taxi, I guess you could say, where it's more like re repurposed buses that are, used for public transportation, but very unique and colorful. They typically have a Bible verse or passage that's painted across the above the windshield. So, I mean, it's really something to experience. But yeah, so all of those nuances, were tricky enough to capture in the English.
Wow, I can imagine. Yeah, as a fellow writer, I don't normally have to convert or travel between those two worlds. So that must have been a challenge. But I applaud the fact that this started in Haiti. In other words, where you put it, it made things more difficult for yourself. But I think that's to me the charm of the book that you wrote, to be able to put it in the English language somehow. But my question, I guess, for you is, when I'm challenged like that, sometimes there's a voice in me that says, hey, maybe I should back off this. Maybe this isn't going to work. I'll do this a different way. I'll tell a different story. How did you know that this idea was worth pursuing and not walking away from?
One, I think I was stubborn. The other is, I think, I attended different webinars over the course of the writing journey. I'm trying to think of storytellers. Is it Storytellers Academy? That was one. And, they had a framework of coming up with an idea and kind of evaluating it. That inspired me to think of, A, the sequence for a counting book, B, setting it in Haiti. And, and the third facet, I think, is the language difference. And so when and I think one of the fourth idea was, advice was then to see what else is out there. I was familiar with kind of the standard counting books, so I had a sense. I did search for books about the Fibonacci sequence, and I came across a book of essentially photographs that had, and it was made for children, not telling a fictional story, but kind of revealing how the Fibonacci sequence is present in nature. So, there were books about the Fibonacci sequence out there, so I'm thinking, okay, well, that in and of itself is not entirely new. But then there aren't that many bilingual English Haitian Creole books. There aren't as many, there are more books, I'd say, set in Haiti for children, which I think is great to see, especially from, writers in the diaspora who are here in the States, but not as many that were bilingual. So in fact, books that I found that I, enjoyed reading to my children, like Auntie Luce's Talking Paintings by, I believe her name is Francie Latour, Edwidge Danticat, 8 Days, A Story of Haiti, I believe it's called, were written primarily in English. So I thought this was a way to kind of follow that tradition, but then add something to it.
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind listening to you. First of all, the part about you being stubborn, welcome to the club. I really don't know an author who doesn't have a stubborn gene in themselves, or we walk away from these projects. The dirty little secret is they're harder than most people think. But walking away you're part of a club of people that tend to not walk away from things. The second thing is, I can't believe there's a second book out there on the Fibonacci sequence for children. That one's going to keep me thinking for the rest of the day. If you gave me the over under on that, I'd say, how about none? But
Right.
okay, so there you go. When you write a book like this, do you begin with the end in mind? I mean, do you see the end and you write to it, or you just let yourself go where the words take you?
So I'd say I did have the end in mind as far as wanting it to end on a positive note.
Mhm.
It wasn't, it is meant to be realistic and speak to the challenges without being heavy-handed, speaking to the challenges of infrastructure and all of that. The idea was that it was meant to be, encouraging and uplifting, and that if you were, for instance, a Haitian American child reading this book, you would feel inspired and see yourself in it, that you would be capable of these things, even if it's, let's say, you don't discover that you are a math whiz, but you see yourself in that inspiration in the book as far as what you're capable of. As far as how it would end exactly, no, that I didn't, foresee. I think that's part of the journey. So it's kind of each step or each page kind of leads you to a moment of reflection. Am I happy with where the story is now? where I've taken it thus far, and how can I continue it and still be true to where it began. So it's not meant to be, let's say, a grind for the first few, and then all of a sudden it's rainbows and but there's still that sense of, that overall positive inspiration.
Yeah. Hey, it's funny that people don't realize when we write our own books that our mood can reflect in our writing, et cetera. I remember I wrote one book, one of my first books, and it's used by some of the universities. And I have students coming up and talking to me about me talking about this beer. And I was drinking a beer, not multiple. I was just having one beer, but I was very loose at the time, and so I got a little looser there. And my editor, I guess, thought it was good, but I was like asking questions, and it just sounded like a guy who was very relaxed. Now you go to another chapter, I'm not quite so relaxed, But that's I think what people don't understand is that for writers, I don't know really many writers, good writers, that wait to be in the perfect mood to write. Writers write. And sometimes, that's why we edit. Sometimes our mood will reflect, how we're feeling that day. A little more
Right.
comfortable, a little more upbeat, a little not so much. Not necessarily your mood, but curious about you. Would you consider yourself an analytical person?
I would. I mean, I think I tried to feel my way through problems too, but to the extent that I can take those skills, I do try to analyze with some limitations. I pitched it to a publisher, and, for instance, there's a scene where she retrieves the medication and she's essentially run off the road and spills all the pills. And someone said, well, why didn't she pick them up and put them back in the bottle? And so, and of course, I since I've mostly received cricket chirps at this point, I hadn't had someone who actually came back to me and with a question. So, I was kind of taken aback, but then I had to think, well, from a sanitary perspective, you wouldn't want to take pills that had just, fallen in the dirt that would, going to be consumed, even if she could theoretically have picked up each one, cleaned them off, to then put them back in the bottle for someone else to consume. So I have her go back to the clinic where she originally picked up the prescription to request another one.
Yeah. Well, and that's the fun part about writing. I mean, I'm more of a nonfiction guy, so I don't run into those problems. But for all my fiction writers, they talk about sometimes writing themselves into corners, and kind of trying to get themselves out of these boxes they write themselves into. Does that happen to you as well?
Absolutely. So it reminds me, my current hobby is crossword puzzles, constructing them. So I'm a big fan of solving them, and the Wall Street Journal is my favorite. But I recently, tried my hand, read some books and resources about constructing them, and so I think just the other day I've been working on this one for hours and weeks, and and the software that I'm using, it tells you when you've essentially put in a letter that makes the whole puzzle unsolvable. So you have to kind of, go back and see where you went wrong. And I finally finished and I was so happy, and then I noticed that I have a four-letter answer that's A1, like the steak sauce, and then another answer that's 1A, and these cross answers that I all thought were great. The last column vertically spelled yeet, which is this, I guess like a slang term. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, it's like I had my nose to it and I thought I painted this masterpiece and I stepped back and it's hideous. So I had to, hit backspace so many times, it was a mess. So that's a case where, and then, there are times where I try to get around the unfillable corner by then picking these really obscure answers or abbreviations that if you look on the internet hard enough, yeah, technically there's such a thing. But the whole idea is that the average person would be able to know this answer or, figure it out with the other, intersecting answers. And so, once I realized that, yeah, I'm trying too hard to make this work, like that's a case where I have to, yeah, take a step back.
Well, it's interesting though that you say that because Yeah, I think sometimes I have a stone here that I could. It's a podcast, so no one can see it but you. But I mean, I keep this on my desktop, and the stone says "never, never quit." So there's this one element, and we just talked about stubbornness, how it really is it's a wonderful trait for a writer, and yet what you're describing is sometimes we have to be careful that it doesn't that the never quit button is not being listened to. In other words, sometimes we do have to quit or we do have to retool.
Right.
I know people, and I'm one of them who've had manuscripts for many, many years. And, it's easy when it's not me to say, and put my arm around somebody and say, I get where you're coming from, but I think it might be time to, put that one away. But the never quit button gets hit,
Right, right.
you kind of get caught on both sides of that thing. It's tough.
But I think you're right with the retooling because, I think about, I'm late to the curve, but I'm trying to get up to speed on AI, for instance, and machine learning, and the whole idea of how it essentially, through trial and error, learns how to pivot to solve a problem, like finding the optimal route to a certain destination. And I think that's kind of how, I mean, we as the humans who program it, we operate the same way, or similarly, I should say. That never, never quit may look like, well, all right, I've hit a roadblock, or how do I not necessarily go backwards, but turn left or right when I'm faced with an obstacle right in front of me and to get around it. Um, so I think there's something to be said for it's more like it's not binary as far as either I keep working on this project or I stop it altogether. It's more how do I've hit this roadblock and how do I pivot from that?
Yeah. One of my pivots, by the way, because I've hit a few manuscripts or ideas for manuscripts that just weren't coming. I pivot, sometimes make them a chapter in where it was supposed to, where it really needs to go. So I may love this one piece. Like, for instance, I'll give you a classic. I've always loved the phrase, instinct versus logic, and
Hmm.
just how many things we do that are instinctive that are just not logical. And they're, the problem is there's so many examples that it's almost an idea that's impossible to contain. And yet in another book, I chose to just take that and make a chapter about this one specific move. And so I was able to sort of be true to that idea, but realized I don't really think it's a manuscript. It's more of a thought and an idea. But that's tough, 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 tough.
Yeah,
Let's stay
yeah,
with your routine a little bit, if I
sure,
could. Uh,
sure.
I think you're more analytical than you give yourself credit for, by the way. I poked you with that question, but I'm smiling over here going, that was a very sort of tepid response. Yeah, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not hanging out with you, but I think you're more analytical than you might think. Uh, so, in that vein, do you have sort of a daily routine that you follow when you write, or certain places that you like to write? Is there routine involved?
I mean, I'm trying to be better about developing a routine. So, between my phone schedule where I have an alert, it's hard to adhere to it rigidly because, life just interrupts. But I find that it's the consistency that really that helps. And, I heard in the context of a podcast, there's I think it was about either the Bible or, the Catholic Catechism that it's the day you put it down that becomes the next day is the hardest to pick it up again.
Mm.
And and I found that that's very true with other endeavors. When I uh, leave it for too long, even if it's worth pursuing, I find that I struggle to get back into it. So even like right now, that's kind of something I'm trying to improve on is being more consistent about writing, even if it's just for a couple of minutes a day.
Right.
Or I may leave that particular document open, um, that Word draft open so that even as soon as I open my computer, I'll see it there and think, ah, yes, I have to get back to writing that, because if I close it, I won't think about it. Um, so, I'm trying to improve my routine by being more consistent. As far as places to write, I would love to have that story of that favorite coffee shop I go to where I can spend the day writing and then years from now they can say, "Oh yeah, he used to come in here every day and order a chai latte uh and
The
turned out
book
this
in itself.
bestseller."
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So fortunately or unfortunately, I guess it's more whether it's home or wherever I can, find the
Yeah.
quiet time and space. So
Makes sense to me. I used to be a distance runner, and when I would train for a race, I would have a certain amount of miles that I wanted to get in a week. But let's say it was 30 or 40 miles. It didn't mean I ran 20 for 2 days. It meant that I'm going to piece this week together and get to that 40. And I actually wrote a piece once called "The Schmuck Running in the Rain." Pardon that language, but it's kind of the idiot running in the rain, where on a Sunday night and it's cold. And I remember seeing somebody, my wife saying, "Look at that schmuck running in the rain." And I went, "No, no, I don't see that. I see somebody who made a commitment, is short on that week. They went to a party on Friday, they had some fun, and they're getting those miles in." And sometimes we pay the price. And for a writer, sometimes that's not going to a party because I said I was going to do blank word count or page count. And I bring this story to you because I think maybe you're similar to me. I don't really have a play. I like writing in the air actually because I travel a lot, but it's more of when I'm into a book, I'm trying to get a page count or a word count. Let's say it's 5 pages a week. Uh, Look, you want to do them all on Monday? That's great. Maybe you can get a couple others in. But if it's Sunday and you just basically haven't done much, then guess what? Sunday is not, you're not going to be watching the football game. You got some
right.
writing to do. That gives me the freedom to say, I'm going to write when I feel like writing. It's not necessarily going to be a Tuesday at 7 o'clock. But I'm swapping with you. That's kind of my approach of more word count, page count, and then let like working out. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
if I miss a workout, I usually make it up somewhere. The OCD ish kicks in. I'm supposed to be in the gym 5 days a week, but I'll get those five in. It just comes in a different way. Any similarities with you, or am I on my own island here?
No, no, no. I tend to keep track if I can of those days that I've missed.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, where there's more, it may not be pages of words, but maybe the time spent.
right,
And, if I can, let's say, yeah, I have half an hour for 4 days, but I know I missed that 120 minutes or 2 hours. So if I can, let's say on a Saturday, try to get 2 hours. Um, so I think at least it helps with the accountability issue. So especially as in this case, individual author for the English, I needed to have a way to keep myself accountable. I will say that, the beauty of, so this was a collaborative effort with one of my aunts who helped me with the Braille translation, to have someone I had to bounce the manuscript off of and, give her updates. Where is it in the, and not from a sense of being demanding, but just curious, letting her know where I was in the querying process, sharing if I got a response back from, an agent or a publisher. That helped me too, to keep going because at that point I was still even after we finished the translation, I still had to go back and edit as I was shopping the manuscript around. So that helped me, stay accountable too. So, for the English, I'd say, yeah, I kind of had to keep myself accountable, but then, you know, working with someone and I'm still in that boat because as it turns out, I'm still trying to find the right illustrator to bring that project to life. So, where the style matches the project and the vision. I'm sure that person, when he or she comes along, would want that same level of accountability from me, where I'm not just sitting on pictures for illustrations for days and weeks with no response, no feedback. It's kind of the nature of it being even for solo authors, it's at some point a collaborative process, agents, publishers, where the accountability helps with forcing us to put that time back on the clock, as far as the amount of time we dedicate to writing, or as you mentioned, word or page count.
right. So let's stay there on the publishing side of things. Where is the book? Is the book published now?
No, so I found a tentative publisher. It's En Route Media and Publishing. And so they have accepted the manuscript. They just want me to provide an illustrated manuscript. So
Okay.
at the moment, I'm kind of reaching out into the world to find that right illustrator. My children are also, and I are also big fans of the Fan Brothers. If you ever look up, there's one book in particular that we've taken out many times in the libraries, Ocean Meets Sky. And it's like a People have different tastes, but I love the fantastic element to it, the
Right.
fantasy element. Um, and so I thought, it would be a nice, I mean, it would be nice to, kind of take that aspect and apply it to Haiti, where it's uh, not to, I guess, paper over cracks, but to kind of almost like an element of magical realism, where you have people doing everyday tasks, taking items to the market, riding their bike, but with that interpretation that kind of sees, this other, like, fantasy aspect or realm to it.
Right. Well, let's
So we'll
do.
see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, let's. I don't normally do this, but let's do this for you.
Sure,
Give us your email address. So if
sure,
maybe somebody's listening who's an illustrator, we'll reach out to you. So how would somebody get a hold of you?
sure. My email address is my first name dot last name at gmail.com, or they could use
Spell it out. Spell it
oh,
out. Trust me, folks. I was 5 minutes studying this name.
sure. PHILIPPE .MONFISTON at gmail.com. Or they can use Percumin Books, PERCUMIN books at gmail.com.
Perfect. Okay. All right. We got that done. And when you have the book launch party, you let me know.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, one last question, and I'll let you go. But I'm curious because you've been at this for a while, and you kind of you. This is a very unique book, and you have your own unique journey. What advice would you give somebody who's listening right now, who's thought to themselves, I've always wanted to do this, particularly a book for children, which is even a more competitive space. Uh, what advice would you give them who's sitting on the sidelines thinking, I want to do it, but I don't know if I've got it in me.
My first piece of advice is, well, at the risk of being oversimplistic, you do. I think it's more, you still have to learn. So it wasn't that, I mean, yes, I did open up a Word document and at least decided to kind of put the initial ideas down. But then I thought, I don't have experience as a children's author. So I sought out any free webinars I could attend. As I mentioned, the Storytellers Academy. I think there are self-publishers out there who also offer free webinars. Yeah, you give them your email address, but you're able to attend the webinars. And so, and whenever someone offered a handout, for instance, on how to structure the book, plot lines, as I mentioned, even just getting a sense of what else is out there. And it's a good practice to develop from the beginning because, as I found, once you enter the querying process, you're expected to provide comps. And so you have to be able to show that you know the lay of the land, to the best of your knowledge, and what other books like yours are out there. And, the worst thing I could say is, well, mine is a bilingual Haitian Creole book, and so there's nothing like it anywhere in the world. And so there are no comps. That's A, it's arrogant, and B, it's not true. Um, so I have to be able to show, agents and publishers that, well, here's what's like my book. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's so many aspects of writing. Oh, there's also, writers and newsletters like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get her name wrong. Uh, Jane, oh my gosh, I can't remember her last name, but she has a newsletter all about, kind of the business of being an author. And so that's something I can appreciate too, where, a lot of times people are, even as they're eager to get into the writing process, they are so focused on the writing, which is, I understand that's the part I gravitate more toward. But then, ideally, we want to be able to support ourselves with our writing, or at least not just have it be a casual thing we do every now and then, but that still requires understanding the business side of it. So, my advice would be, like start from the perspective that you can do it, um, but then, be willing to to learn and find the resources that help you, improve you in all aspects of the craft.
Yeah, really well said. Both parts of it. I'll just land on the second part, which is what you're describing is basically you got to learn how to sell your book. And publishers aren't really all that complicated. Everybody thinks it's very political. It's not that complicated. They have one thing in mind. Look at their eyes very carefully. You'll see $2 signs, one on each pupil. Okay. They are trying to stay in business. What you just described was, in a sense, doing their work for them, answering the question that they may or may not ask, but it's on their mind, which is, are we going to take a loss on this book? How do we know that this book will sell? So saying things like there's no other book out there, that's a lazy way of doing it. Besides, I already learned earlier in the podcast, there is another book and many more that are similar. So that's ridiculous. What else is out there? What makes your book different? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What are you going to be able to do to help move this book? What kind of branding can you put behind this? So it's not bad luck or good luck a lot of times. It's just the better job you can do at answering the question that you just brought up for us here is going to give you a shot at those conventional publishers if that's the route you want to go. So my hat's off to you, by the way. Congratulations on finding that publisher. That's the hard part. We'll get you a graphic artist. We'll figure that out.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Listen, really enjoyed speaking with you. I was sweating beginning because a few words there that I was struggling with. But I hung in there. Yes, I didn't say them twice. But anyway, really, really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rob. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's guest author, we'd love you to rate, review, and share this episode with others. If you'd like more information on today's guest or the Maryland Writers Association, please visit our website at marylandwriters.org. You can also hear a brief history of the Maryland Writers Association by listening to episode 0.